Okay, let's dive into this. Imagine finding this incredible knowledge in a 1400-year-old text. It really makes you pause.
It does.
How could a book from that long ago have details that, science has only figured out recently?
That's a big question. And it's basically what we're looking into today. We're digging into the Quran and also the Hadiths, the sayings and traditions of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Right.
We want to see how specific statements in these texts sort of line up with modern science.
Exactly. We're not talking about vague stuff here. We're looking at actual descriptions of the natural world. We've got Quranic verses from the surahs and ayahs and related hadith, and we're comparing them with, modern scientific findings, expert opinions in embryology, oceanography, cosmology, all sorts.
Our mission really is to find those moments that make you go, aha, where this ancient text seems to echo or even predate what we know now.
So the big question hanging over this is, what do these parallels mean? Are they just coincidences or something more?
A good place to start is right at the beginning. Life itself. Embryology.
Okay, yeah, this part is really fascinating. There's a hadith, right? It talks about what happens after 42 nights from conception.
That's the one.
It says an angel shapes the embryo, gives it ears, eyes, skin, flesh, bones, and determines the sex.
And think about that time frame. 42 nights. That's around, what, 6 weeks?
Right. And modern embryology tells us that distinct human features start becoming identifiable around day 40. The timing is, it's very close.
It is. And the Hadith also mentions the sex determination happening after that 42-day point.
Which we couldn't definitively know until we had powerful microscopes centuries later. Back then, how could you possibly observe that?
Exactly. And this brings us to Professor Keith Moore. He was a prominent figure, professor and chairman of anatomy at the University of Toronto.
An expert in embryology. What did he say?
Well, he pointed out that up until the 19th century, the way science classified embryonic stages was, frankly, quite basic.
Oh.
But Professor Moore argued that the Quran's descriptions, based on, observable changes in shape and actions, offered a better, more practical system.
A better system. That's a strong claim from an expert.
It is. And his conclusion was even stronger. He basically said, look, this knowledge couldn't have come from Muhammad himself.
Meaning?
Meaning it had to have come from God, from Allah. Because most of these details weren't discovered scientifically for centuries.
Wow. And he even suggested modern embryology could learn from the Quranic system.
He did. And it's worth noting, Professor Moore actually converted to Islam later on.
That's significant. So it leaves you with that question, doesn't it? How could someone in 7th century Arabia have this kind of detailed embryological knowledge?
It certainly makes you think about the source. What could it be?
Okay, let's shift gears. What about something fundamental like the water cycle?
Right. Surah 39, Ayah 21 in the Quran asks, essentially, haven't you seen how Allah sends rain from the sky and guides it into the earth as springs?
Simple, but it captures the essence, right?
Right.
Rain, groundwater.
Exactly. But the key thing is a full, accurate understanding of the whole cycle of evaporation, condensation, the whole works that didn't really come together scientifically until the 18th century.
So again, centuries beforehand, the Quran is laying out this basic, accurate picture of how water moves.
It's a concise description, yes, long before science mapped it all out.
Okay, from water on land to water in the deep ocean. This is an area we couldn't even explore until pretty recently.
And this is where some descriptions get really striking. Take Surah 24, Ayah 40.
Yeah.
It uses this analogy for disbelief.
Which is?
Like a darkness in a vast, deep ocean, overwhelmed with wave upon wave.
Wave upon wave in the deep ocean. That sounds intense. What could that refer to?
Well, modern oceanography has discovered internal waves. These aren't the waves on the surface. They happen deep down, between layers of water with different densities. So you literally have waves under the surface waves.
Wow. Internal waves. Okay. And the darkness part.
The verse continues, saying in this deep darkness, you couldn't even see your own hand.
And scientifically?
We know light gets absorbed as it goes deeper into water. Red light goes first, then orange, yellow. By the time you get down to maybe 1,000 meters, it's pitch black. No sunlight penetrates. You absolutely couldn't see your hand.
So the Quran describes wave upon wave and this level of profound darkness.
Precisely. And remember, we now know about bioluminescent creatures down there, which kind of underscores just how dark it is otherwise.
Was there any expert commentary on this?
Yes. Professor Rao, a marine biologist, he looked at this and basically said, 1,400 years ago, no ordinary person could have known this stuff. these details about the deep sea. He suggested it points to a non-human source.
So the internal waves, the progressive darkness with depth. How could these details appear in the Quran so long before we had submarines and deep-sea probes?
It's another one of those compelling points, isn't it?
Definitely. Okay, let's go from the depths of the ocean to the vastness of space. Cosmology.
Right. And here, some of the connections are potentially, well, mind-blowing.
Like the expanding universe. I know that was a big debate in the 20th century. Big Bang versus static state.
Exactly. And the evidence, like redshift from distant galaxies, eventually pointed strongly towards expansion.
Okay. And the Quran.
Surah 51, Ayah 47. It says, "The heaven, we have built it with power, and we are expanding it."
We are expanding it. Present tense.
Yes. Suggesting it's happening right now, an ongoing process. This was stated centuries before Hubble and the scientific confirmation.
And the expanding universe is now what, the standard model?
Absolutely. It's the consensus view.
Yeah.
Then there's the origin itself, the Big Bang idea, everything starting from a single, incredibly dense point.
Like a singularity.
Right. Compare that with Surah 21, Ayah 30. "Have not those who disbelieved known that the heavens and the earth were joined together as one united piece? Then we parted them."
Joined together, then parted. That does sound a bit like the Big Bang concept, doesn't it? A common origin.
The parallel is certainly drawn by many.
Mm-hmm.
And that same verse continues, "And we have made from water every living thing."
Back to water. And that's just the basic biological fact, right? Everything needs water. We're mostly water.
Exactly. 70–80% for humans. It links the cosmic origin to the basis of life.
What about the very early universe? Any descriptions there?
Well, the Quran uses the word dukhan, which means smoke or vapor, to describe the state of the heavens early on.
Smoke.
Which lines up pretty well with the scientific picture of a hot, dense, opaque plasma in the early universe.
Yeah.
Like a primordial cosmic smoke.
Okay, wow. What about how things move up there? Planets? Stars?
The Quran mentions the sun and moon each traveling in an orbit, using an Arabic word that implies self-propelled motion. Some interpret this as suggesting rotation as well as orbit.
And we know now that...
Well, the Earth spins and orbits the sun. The moon spins and orbits Earth. And the sun itself spins and orbits the center of the Milky Way. It's all in motion, rotating and orbiting.
So the Quran captured this complex dance centuries ago.
It describes celestial bodies having their own motion in orbits, yes.
What about Earth itself, its shape?
There are verses, like in Surah 31 and 39, that talk about night and day merging, using an Arabic word kawara.
Kawar.
Yeah, it means to coil or wrap around, like winding a turban, which strongly suggests a spherical shape, because that's how night smoothly wraps around into day on a globe.
Makes sense.
And there's another interpretation of a word describing Earth's shape as being like an ostrich egg.
An ostrich egg? Why that?
Because an ostrich egg isn't perfectly round, it's slightly flattened or elongated, and the Earth isn't a perfect sphere either. It bulges at the equator and is flatter at the poles. Geoid shape.
So potentially describing not just roundness, but the specific shape.
That's one interpretation, yes. It's quite specific.
Okay, one more from Cosmology. The sun and moon's light.
Ah, yes. Surah 10, Ayah 5. It calls the sun Siraj, a shining lamp, something generating its own light and heat.
Like a star.
Exactly. But the moon is called an-nur, just light, implying reflected light.
Which is scientifically accurate. Sun makes light, moon reflects it. Was that common knowledge back then?
Not universally, no. Many ancient cultures had different ideas about the moon's light. So making that clear distinction is notable.
Any expert views on the astronomy points?
Professor Yoshidi Kusan from the Tokyo Observatory, he expressed being really impressed finding accurate astronomical facts in the Quran, saying it gave a sort of total picture of the universe.
So, expansion, origin, water, orbits, Earth-shaped sun and moonlight. How could all that be in a 1,400-year-old text? It's a lot to consider.
It is indeed. Shall we bring it back down to Earth? Geology?
Let's do it. Mountains. I remember a verse about mountains as stakes.
That's Surah 78, verses 6 and 7. "Have we not made the earth an expanse, and the mountains as stakes?"
Atad. Stakes. Like tent pegs.
Exactly like tent pegs, where most of the peg is hidden underground, anchoring the tent.
Okay. And what's the significance?
Well, another verse, Surah 31, Ayah 10, says, "Allah placed firm mountains on the earth so it wouldn't shake with you," implying they stabilize things.
Stabilizers. Okay, how does that connect to geology?
Modern geology, particularly seismology, has shown that mountains have deep roots going way down into the Earth's mantle, just like stakes.
Really? Deep roots?
Yeah, and there's a well-regarded theory that these roots help stabilize the Earth's crust. They act sort of like anchors within the moving tectonic plates, possibly reducing the intensity or frequency of earthquakes.
And maybe stabilizing Earth's rotation, too.
That's another hypothesis, yes, that their mass distribution acts as a counterbalance. These are theories, but the Quran's description of mountains as deep-rooted stakes that provide stability, written centuries ago,
Is quite a parallel to modern geological understanding. Again, how did they know about roots deep inside the Earth back then?
it's a striking image and connection.
Okay, finally, let's touch on a few points from biology. Anything stand out there?
A few interesting things. Bees, for instance. There's a whole chapter, Surah An-Nahl, the bee.
Right?
And when the Quran talks about the bee going out to gather nectar, it consistently uses the feminine grammatical form in Arabic.
Feminine. Why is that important?
Because for a long time, people thought bees were like male soldiers serving a king bee.
Ah, but the worker bees are actually...
Female. And the hive is led by a queen, not a king. So the Quran used the correct gender long before science figured it out.
Interesting detail. What else?
Plant reproduction. Surah 15, Ayah 22 says, "And we have sent forth the winds that fertilize."
Winds that fertilize, like pollination.
Exactly. It points to wind pollination, which requires understanding that plants have genders, so to speak, and that wind plays a role in carrying pollen between them.
Okay, another one.
Subatomic particles. Remember the old Greek idea from Democritus that atoms were the smallest possible thing, indivisible.
Yeah, the atomos.
But we now know atoms are divisible. Protons, neutrons, electrons, quarks, smaller and smaller stuff.
Right.
Well, Surah 34, Ayah 3, talks about God's knowledge encompassing everything down to an atom's weight and even anything smaller than that.
Smaller than an atom. Explicitly mentioned.
Explicitly stated, yes.
Okay.
Centuries before we split the atom.
Okay, that's pretty direct. One last one.
Fingerprints. This one's quite profound, I think. Surah 75 talks about God being able to reassemble humans on the day of resurrection, saying he can perfectly reconstruct even the very tips of his fingers.
Fingertips. Why focus on fingertips?
Well, what's special about fingertips?
Fingerprints. They're unique to each person.
Exactly. And that uniqueness wasn't scientifically understood or used for identification until much, much later. So why mention fingertips specifically in the context of recreating someone perfectly?
It implies knowledge of that unique identity, down to the tiniest detail. God knows your unique fingerprint.
That's the implication. A testament to divine knowledge and power over individual creation.
So bee gender, wind pollination, subatomic particles, unique fingerprints. These are quite specific biological points.
They are, and they add to this pattern of statements in the Quran that seem to resonate strongly with later scientific discoveries.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, let's just quickly recap. We've seen these striking correlations in embryology, the details matching timelines.
Right, and in cosmology, the expanding universe, the origin, the nature of sun and moonlight.
Geology, with the mountains as stakes, having deep roots and stabilizing the Earth.
And biology, from bee gender to fingerprints and particles smaller than atoms.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about the implications. When an ancient text seems to hold this kind of information, confirmed centuries later by science, what does that mean?
That's really the core question we wanted to explore, and it's a question for you, the listener, to reflect on too. What does this exploration spark for you?
Yeah, we definitely encourage you to look into these things further yourself. Read the Quran, read the science, see what connections you find.
And maybe the biggest question to leave you with is this. What does it mean for our whole understanding of knowledge, of truth itself, when ancient sources contain insights that modern science seems to be catching up with?
A question worth pondering.